Welcome to a journey through a dark chapter in human history, the Holocaust. A period marked by unthinkable horrors, a time when humanity was tested to its limits, and a chapter that left a deep scar on the face of the world. The Holocaust was not a random act of violence, but a systematic, state-sponsored genocide, meticulously planned and executed by the Nazi regime in Germany during the Second World War. Over 6 million Jews, along with millions of Romani people, disabled individuals, and others deemed undesirable by the Nazis, were exterminated in ghettos, concentration camps, and extermination camps. This monstrous episode of history wasn't an overnight event. It was the culmination of years of hate-filled rhetoric, discrimination, and dehumanization, driven by an ideology that believed in racial purity and supremacy. It was a time when human life was reduced to numbers, identities to badges, and existence to survival. But why revisit this dark chapter? Why delve into a past filled with such pain and suffering? The answer lies in the power of remembrance and education. By understanding our history, we can strive to prevent such atrocities from happening again. We can learn about the dangers of hate and intolerance, and the devastating effects they can have on humanity. As we embark on this journey, we'll explore the rise of the Nazi ideology, the systematic persecution and dehumanization of targeted groups, the establishment of ghettos and concentration camps, the implementation of the final solution, the courageous instances of resistance and resilience, and the aftermath of the Holocaust, including the Nuremberg Trials. We'll listen to the voices of those who lived through these horrors, voices that echo with the resilience of the human spirit, voices that remind us of our responsibility to remember and learn from our past. This is not an easy journey, but it is a necessary one. It is a journey that bears witness to the darkest corners of humanity, but also to the incredible strength of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. This is a story of human suffering, resilience, and the indomitable spirit of survival. The rise of Nazi ideology didn't occur overnight. It was a slow, insidious process. The seeds of this extreme ideology were planted in a Germany riddled with economic hardship, social unrest, and political instability following the end of World War I. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, left Germany crippled with war debts and a sense of national humiliation. This created fertile ground for the birthing of a radical ideology that promised strength, unity, and a return to former glory. Enter Adolf Hitler and the National Socialist German Workers' Party, more commonly known as the Nazi Party. Hitler, a charismatic speaker, was able to tap into the collective discontent and desperation of the German people. He provided them with scapegoats for their woes, primarily targeting Jews, but also communists, socialists, and other groups he deemed undesirable. The ideology of the Nazi Party was built on a foundation of extreme nationalism, racial purity, and an intense hatred for Jews, or anti-Semitism. The Nazis propagated the notion of an Aryan master race, a racially pure group of people superior to all others. They saw Jews along with Romani people, disabled individuals, and others as threats to this racial purity, and painted them as enemies of the German state. But how did such extremist views take hold in the hearts and minds of so many? Well, it was through a powerful propaganda machine that the Nazis were able to disseminate their ideology. They controlled the media, the educational system, and all cultural and intellectual output. Their propaganda was pervasive, infiltrating every aspect of German society. It served to normalize their views and to dehumanize those they targeted. The Nazis began implementing anti-Semitic policies almost as soon as they came into power in 1933. They started by boycotting Jewish businesses, a move that was followed by the infamous Nuremberg laws of 1935. These laws stripped Jews of their rights as German citizens, prohibited marriages between Jews and non-Jews, and defined a Jew based on ancestry rather than religion. These laws essentially institutionalized the Nazis' racial ideology. The Nazis also used propaganda to justify these policies and to further alienate Jews from society. They produced films, radio programs, and print media that depicted Jews as dangerous and subhuman. They used stereotypes and hateful rhetoric to perpetuate the idea that Jews were responsible for Germany's problems. The Nazi ideology of racial superiority was not limited to anti-Semitism, though. It also fueled their expansionist ambitions. The concept of Lebensraum, or living space, was a core component of their ideology. Hitler believed that the so-called Aryan race was entitled to expand eastwards, displacing or exterminating the native Slavic populations in the process. This belief would later serve as a key justification for their aggressive territorial expansion during World War II. By the late 1930s, the Nazi ideology had taken a firm grip on German society. It was used to justify a series of increasingly aggressive and oppressive measures, paving the way for the mass atrocities that would come in the following years. The rise of Nazi ideology serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of hate, intolerance, and unchecked power. It shows us how extremist views can take root in a society plagued by hardship and fear, and how these views can be manipulated by those in power to justify horrific acts of violence and persecution. These policies set the stage for the horrors to come. The systematic persecution, dehumanization, and eventual extermination of millions of innocent lives during the Holocaust was not an isolated event. It was the culmination of years of ideological indoctrination, propaganda, and policy-making by a regime that thrived on hate and fear. As we delve deeper into this dark chapter of human history, let us remember the human cost of such hatred and intolerance, and strive to ensure that such horrors are never repeated. The Nazi regime systematically targeted and persecuted millions of innocent lives. The systematic persecution and dehumanization of targeted groups during the Holocaust was a brutal and calculated process. The Nazis developed a sinister hierarchy of human worth, placing the Aryan race at the top and deeming others, particularly Jews, Romani people, disabled individuals, and others, as inferior and unworthy of life. This was not an overnight process. It was a gradual, insidious shift that allowed for the acceptance of unimaginable horrors. The first step in this process of dehumanization was the enactment of discriminatory laws. The Nuremberg laws of 1935, for example, stripped Jews of their German citizenship, forbidding marriages between Jews and non-Jews, and implementing a range of other discriminatory measures. These laws did not merely serve a bureaucratic purpose. They were designed to ostracize Jews from society, to strip them of their humanity in the eyes of their neighbors, friends, and even family. The Nazis also targeted the Romani people, also known as gypsies, subjecting them to similar discriminatory laws. They were excluded from society, their traditional nomadic lifestyle criminalized, and many were forced into slums or internment camps. Disabled individuals were also targeted, seen as a burden on the Aryan race. The Nazis initiated a eugenics program, T4, which resulted in the systematic murder of hundreds of thousands of disabled individuals deemed life unworthy of life. These laws, while horrific in their own right, were just the beginning. They paved the way for the establishment of ghettos, areas in cities cordoned off for Jews and other undesirables. These ghettos were typically overcrowded with poor living conditions and little access to food or healthcare. They were essentially open-air prisons, further isolating these groups from the rest of society. Propaganda played a crucial role in this process of dehumanization. The Nazis used popular media, including newspapers, films, and radio broadcasts, to spread their ideology of hate. They portrayed Jews and other targeted groups as subhuman, often using animalistic or demonic imagery. This propaganda served to justify their actions in the eyes of the German public and desensitize them to the suffering of these groups. The dehumanization process reached its peak with the introduction of identification measures. Jews were forced to wear a yellow Star of David on their clothing, a mark of shame and a constant reminder of their perceived inferiority. They were no longer individuals with their own identities. They were reduced to a symbol, a number. This was a psychological weapon designed to strip them of their dignity, to make them feel less than human. This process of persecution and dehumanization was not random or spontaneous. It was a methodically planned and executed strategy, designed to facilitate the systematic extermination of millions of innocent lives. By dehumanizing these groups, the Nazis were able to convince themselves and others that they were not killing human beings, but rather, they were exterminating pests, a threat to the Aryan race. The dehumanization was not confined to the Nazis. It permeated throughout German society and beyond. Neighbors turned against neighbors, friends against friends, and even family members against each other. The fear and hatred sown by the Nazis created a society where empathy and kindness were replaced with suspicion and cruelty. The dehumanization of these groups was not a passive process. It required active participation from society. It required people to accept the idea that some lives were worth less than others, that some people were less than human. And tragically, many did accept this idea, whether out of fear, indifference, or active belief in the Nazi ideology. The dehumanization of these groups was not just a means to an end, it was an end in itself. It was a way for the Nazis to exert control, to instill fear, and to justify their actions. It was a way for them to cleanse their conscience, to convince themselves that they were not murderers, but saviors of the Aryan race. The dehumanization was a precursor to the mass atrocities that were to unfold. This process of dehumanization was not limited to the Holocaust. It is a recurring theme in genocides throughout history. It serves as a stark reminder of the depths to which humanity can sink when fear and hatred are allowed to take root, and the importance of standing up against discrimination, prejudice, and dehumanization in all its forms. We must remember this dark chapter in human history, not just as a testament to the horrors of the past, but as a warning for the future. We must strive to create a world where every individual is valued and respected, where differences are celebrated rather than feared, and where every life is recognized as innately and unequivocally human. The establishment of ghettos and concentration camps marked a new phase in the Holocaust. As the horror of the Holocaust unfolded, the Nazi regime sought to contain, isolate, and exploit their targeted populations. Ghettos and concentration camps became central to this strategy. Ghettos were urban areas, often walled off, where Jews were forcibly relocated. The largest of these was the Warsaw Ghetto in Poland, which held over 400,000 Jews at its peak. Conditions in the ghettos were abysmal. Overcrowding, starvation, and disease were rampant, making them effective tools of dehumanization and death. Concentration camps, on the other hand, were initially used for political dissidents and other undesirables. However, as the final solution took shape, they evolved into centers for mass extermination. The first of these was Dachau, established in March 1933, just weeks after Hitler came to power. The ghettos and concentration camps were not merely prisons, they were engines of exploitation, where inmates were subjected to forced labor under brutal conditions. The Nazis saw their prisoners as a source of cheap labor, to be used and discarded at will. People were worked to exhaustion, often in hazardous conditions, with little to no food, proper clothing, or medical care. Many died from the sheer physical strain, while others succumbed to malnutrition and disease. AuschwitzBirkenau, arguably the most notorious of the concentration camps, was both a labor camp and a death camp. It consisted of three main parts: Auschwitz first, the original camp; Auschwitz second, Birkenau, a combined concentration and extermination camp; and Auschwitz III, Monowitz, a labor camp. At its peak, Auschwitz was home to over 100,000 prisoners, most of whom were Jews. At Auschwitz and other extermination camps, the scale of the atrocities was staggering. Upon arrival, prisoners were sorted through a process known as selection. Those deemed unfit for work, including the elderly, the sick, and children, were sent directly to gas chambers. Others were assigned to labor details, their lives prolonged only for as long as they could be exploited. The gas chambers were the ultimate expression of the Nazi regime's genocidal intent. They were designed for mass murder, capable of killing thousands at a time. Victims were told they were being taken for a shower, a cruel deception that added psychological torment to the physical horror that awaited them. Once inside, they were exposed to Zyklon B, a pesticide-turned-deadly weapon. Death came quickly, but not painlessly. Survivors of the ghettos and concentration camps have left us with harrowing accounts of their experiences. These testimonies, often given decades after the events, are a chilling reminder of the depths to which humanity can sink. They speak of unimaginable suffering, of lives lived in constant fear, and of the struggle to maintain dignity and hope in the face of overwhelming brutality. Yet even in the midst of such darkness, there were occasional glimmers of humanity. There were acts of resistance, both large and small, by those imprisoned. There were also instances of aid and support from unexpected sources, including from within the ranks of the Nazis themselves. These stories, while far from negating the horror, serve as a testament to the human spirit's capacity for resilience and courage. The legacy of the ghettos and concentration camps is a complex one. On the one hand, they stand as stark reminders of the horrors that can arise when hatred and bigotry are allowed to flourish unchecked. On the other hand, they also serve as symbols of resistance and resilience, of the human capacity to endure and to hope, even in the darkest of times. But let us not forget that these were not abstract symbols. They were real places, where real people lived, suffered, and died. They were places of unimaginable suffering and brutality. The memory of these places, and of the atrocities committed within their walls, must never be allowed to fade. We owe it to the victims, to the survivors, and to ourselves, to remember and to learn from this dark chapter in our collective history. These were places of unimaginable suffering and brutality. The final solution was the Nazi regime's plan to systematically exterminate entire populations. This grim term, coined by the Nazis themselves, was a euphemism for their horrifically efficient plan to eradicate the Jewish people from the face of the earth. It was in the year of 1941 that the final solution was set into motion. The decision to exterminate was not spontaneous. Rather, it was the culmination of years of escalating anti-Semitic policies and propaganda. The Nazis had constructed a narrative that painted the Jews as the enemy of the German people, and the final solution was presented as the only way to secure the future of the Aryan race. The implementation of the final solution was chilling in its efficiency and cold-hearted calculation. The Nazis utilized a range of methods to carry out their genocide, each one more horrific than the last. Mass shootings were often the first wave of extermination, with Einsatzgruppen, or mobile killing units, rounding up Jews in occupied territories and executing them en masse. Yet the scale of the final solution required a method that was even more systematic. This led to the development and use of gas chambers, the most infamous of which were located in death camps such as Auschwitz and Treblinka. Victims were herded into these chambers under the pretense of receiving a shower, only to be killed en masse with poisonous gas. The gas chambers allowed the Nazis to murder thousands of people each day, a pace of killing unparalleled in human history. The extermination process did not stop there. The Nazis took meticulous care to hide the evidence of their crimes. Bodies were burned in crematoria or in open-air pits, and personal belongings were sorted and repurposed for the German war effort. Such was the scale of the operation that it required its own logistical and bureaucratic support, with countless individuals complicit in the machinery of death. Yet, it's important to remember that the final solution was not an impersonal, distant process. It was carried out by human beings who made the choice to participate in genocide. They were ordinary men and women, not monsters from some dark fairy tale. They were people who had been seduced by a hateful ideology and who chose to turn their backs on their shared humanity. The sheer scale of the final solution is hard to comprehend. 6 million Jews were murdered, accounting for 2/3 of the Jewish population in Europe. Entire communities, families, languages, and traditions were wiped out, leaving a void that can never be filled. But the final solution was not just about numbers. It was about individuals, each with their own story, dreams, and potential. They were mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, friends and neighbors. They were artists and scholars, workers and business owners, the young and the old. They were people, just like us, whose lives were brutally cut short by an unfathomable wave of hatred and violence. The final solution stands as a stark reminder of the depths to which humanity can sink when blinded by hatred and prejudice. It serves as a warning of what can happen when we dehumanize others and treat them as less than human. It's a testament to the sheer destructive power of bigotry and the terrible price we pay when we allow it to take root. As we delve into this dark chapter of history, let us remember the victims of the final solution. Let us remember their humanity, their dignity, and their courage in the face of unspeakable horror. And let us pledge to do all we can to ensure that such a tragedy is never repeated. This was genocide on an unprecedented scale. In the face of unimaginable horror, there were acts of resistance and resilience. In the midst of the darkness that was the Holocaust, glimmers of light shone through. There were those who, despite the overwhelming odds, dared to resist, dared to defy, dared to fight back. These stories of resistance and resilience are as integral to understanding the Holocaust as the atrocities themselves. Let's cast our minds back to the ghettos and concentration camps. Imagine the despair, the fear, the hopelessness. And yet, within these bleak confines, courage flickered. In Warsaw, the largest ghetto in Nazi-occupied Europe, a group of Jewish fighters, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, staged a rebellion in 1943. Armed with a handful of weapons and an indomitable spirit, they held off the Nazis for nearly a month. Then there were the partisans, guerrilla fighters who waged a covert war against the Nazis from the forests and mountains of Europe. They sabotaged Nazi supply lines, carried out rescue missions to free prisoners, and spread information about the atrocities occurring in the concentration camps. Theirs was a fight not just for survival, but for truth and justice. But resistance wasn't always about fighting back with weapons. It was also about preserving dignity, culture, and humanity amid the dehumanizing conditions of the camps. It was about clandestine schools in the ghettos, where teachers risked their lives to educate children. It was about secret religious services held in the shadows of the barracks. It was about the musicians who played forbidden music, and the artists who sketched scenes of camp life bearing silent witness to the horrors they endured. And then there were the acts of solidarity. Non-Jewish individuals and groups who, at great personal risk, helped Jews and other persecuted people. They hid families in their homes, forged documents, smuggled food into the ghettos, and aided in escape attempts. Known as the righteous among the nations, these individuals demonstrated that compassion and decency could endure even in the darkest of times. Finally, we must acknowledge the resilience of the survivors. Those who, despite the trauma and devastation, found the strength to rebuild their lives, to bear witness to the horrors they had endured, and to ensure that the world would never forget. Their resilience is a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit, a beacon of hope that even in the face of the most profound darkness, we can find the light. Through these acts of resistance and resilience, the persecuted communities of the Holocaust refused to be silenced, refused to be dehumanized. They fought back, they held on to their humanity, and they survived. They challenged the narrative that the Nazis sought to impose, proving that even in the face of the most brutal regime, the human spirit could not be crushed. These acts of courage, solidarity, and defiance stand as a testament to the human spirit. The end of the Holocaust marked the beginning of a long journey towards justice and healing. As the Second World War drew to a close, the atrocities of the Holocaust were laid bare for the world to see. The liberation of concentration camps by Allied forces revealed the unimaginable horrors that had been perpetrated within their walls. In the aftermath, the world was left grappling with the scale of the horror and the question of how to seek justice for such monumental crimes. The answer came in the form of the Nuremberg Trials. These were a series of military tribunals held by the Allied forces after World War II to prosecute prominent leaders of Nazi Germany who had participated in the Holocaust and other war crimes. The Nuremberg Trials were unprecedented in history. They put on trial individuals, not for their actions on the battlefield, but for their part in the systematic planning and execution of genocide. The trials underscored a powerful message that individuals, regardless of their position, could be held accountable for their actions, and that crimes against humanity would not go unpunished. Among those prosecuted were high-ranking political and military officials, such as Hermann Göring, Rudolf Hess, and Joachim von Ribbentrop. They were charged with crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. The trials resulted in 12 death sentences, 7 imprisonments, and 3 acquittals. Yet the Nuremberg trials were not without controversy. Some argued that they were merely victors' justice, with the Allies themselves avoiding scrutiny for their own wartime actions. Others contended that the trials didn't go far enough, as countless others who were complicit in the Holocaust escaped justice. Beyond the courtroom, the aftermath of the Holocaust was marked by the immense task of rebuilding lives shattered by trauma. Survivors were left to grapple with the loss of entire families, communities, and ways of life. Many faced the daunting task of starting anew in a world that had stood by as they suffered. They rebuilt their lives with remarkable resilience, creating new families and communities, contributing to their societies, and ensuring that the world would not forget the horrors they had endured. Their stories of survival and resilience are a testament to the indomitable human spirit. Yet the shadow of the Holocaust continues to loom large. The genocide left deep scars on the collective memory of humanity, a painful reminder of the depths to which intolerance and hatred can sink. It is a reminder that we must remain vigilant against the forces of bigotry and xenophobia, striving to build a world founded on understanding, empathy, and respect for all. Justice, however, could not erase the scars left by the Holocaust. Remembering the Holocaust is critical in preventing future atrocities. This statement rings true, not only in the context of history, but also in our present day. The Holocaust represents one of the darkest chapters in human history, a time when humanity witnessed the depths of its own capacity for cruelty and hate. It's crucial to educate ourselves about the Holocaust, to understand the circumstances that led up to it, and to recognize the signs of hatred and intolerance that fueled it. Education is more than just learning facts. It's about fostering empathy, promoting tolerance, and understanding the value of every human life. By learning about the Holocaust, we come to understand the profound human cost of hatred and intolerance. Holocaust education isn't about dwelling in the past, but about using the lessons of history to shape a more compassionate future. It's about ensuring that the voices of the victims and survivors are heard, that their stories are told, and that their experiences are not forgotten. It's about standing up against prejudice, discrimination, and bigotry in all its forms. There are numerous resources available for those who wish to learn more about the Holocaust. Organizations such as the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, Yad Vashem in Israel, and the Anne Frank House in the Netherlands offer a wealth of information, including survivor testimonies, historical documents, and educational materials. These institutions, along with many others, work tirelessly to preserve the memory of the Holocaust and educate future generations. Visiting Holocaust memorials and museums can be a deeply moving experience. It's a chance to pay tribute to the millions of lives lost, to witness the resilience of survivors, and to reflect on our collective responsibility to prevent such atrocities from happening again. We remember to learn, to understand, and to prevent. These are not just words, but a call to action. To remember the Holocaust is to acknowledge the horrors of the past, to learn from them, and to strive towards a future where such atrocities are unthinkable. The Holocaust is a dark chapter in human history that we must never forget. It stands as a stark reminder of the profound human cost of hatred and intolerance. This horrifying era was characterized by the systematic and brutal extermination of millions of innocent lives, a genocide fueled by a toxic ideology of racial superiority. The rise of Nazi ideology, the persecution and dehumanization of targeted groups, the establishment of ghettos and concentration camps, and the implementation of the final solution. These are the key insights into the Holocaust horrors that we've explored. Each aspect is a testament to the depths of cruelty humanity can descend into when blinded by hatred. But even in such darkness, we saw glimmers of resistance and resilience. Stories of courage, solidarity, and defiance against the Nazi regime emerged, reminding us of the indomitable human spirit. In reflection, let us remember the past and learn from it. Let us strive to create a world of compassion and understanding, a world where such horrors are unthinkable.